This is the Adizero SL2. And while it gains more Lightstrike Pro midsole foam than last year, it also gains a bit more in price. So are the upgrades worth the cost? It's time to lace up the Adizero SL2 and take it for a run.
사람이 모래도 안 마배 You wouldn't believe all the times in my life 내가 포기할 자신 난 누구나도 봐도 알아줄 수 있는 거는 내가 팔로처럼 I'm wavy
Yo, what's going on? My name is Kafuzi and I'm a non-elite runner who reviews running shoes here on YouTube. And today I want to talk to you guys all about the Adidas Adizero SL2. But before I give you my thoughts on this shoe, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that Adidas sent to me for the purpose of review, so I did not have to pay for these shoes. However, nobody's paying me to make this video or to include their shoe in this video, and no one's gonna get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the Adizero SL2, and let's start with the specs. This is a 36mm stack height shoe with a 10mm drop, giving us 26mm of stack height in the forefoot of the shoe. And we've got two different types of foam. This outer layer or carrier layer, the black foam that you see in my shoe here, that is Lightstrike EVA foam. And then within that carrier, there's a full length insert of Lightstrike Pro, which Lightstrike Pro is Adidas's racing caliber foam. It's much more premium than just the regular Lightstrike. Last year's Adizero SL had a puck in the forefoot of Lightstrike Pro. This year with the Adizero SL2, they're going with the full length from heel to toe, doubling the amount of Lightstrike Pro that's in the shoe. Moving to the outsole, we have a similar pattern to what we saw last year. It's not continental rubber on this shoe, but it is a outsole pattern that is both generous or grippy, but we have some updates to better highlight the fact that there is heel to toe Lightstrike Pro in this shoe. We've got 3 cutouts in the front, which also mimics the pattern that we see in a lot of the top-end racing shoes that's in this Adizero lineup. And we also see a cutout towards the heel, so you can see that the Lightstrike Pro does go all the way back. We also get another shot at the Lightstrike Pro that's in this shoe by looking at the side window, which I think is a beautiful design flourish in this shoe where you get a nice cutaway. Now onto the upper, we have a single layer mesh, which is very soft and very breathable, and it stays nice and thin and breathable throughout most of the shoe. There are some overlays that provide some structural support. And then when we get to the back into the heel cup, that's where we see a little bit of structure, but it's overall pretty floppy, so I'm not too upset about it. I think the tongue stays about the same, very lightly padded just like last year, and they've really reduced the amount of padding that's in this shoe from last year, which is a big plus in my book because I just generally don't like a ton of puffiness in my daily trainers, but also it's really hot this time of year in Crystal Lake, and so having less of a sweat sponge is definitely more comfortable for me. Altogether, this shoe comes in at a very respectable weight of 236 grams or 8.3 ounces. Now that we've talked about the paper specs, let's talk about what it's like to get it out on the roads. The Adizero SL2 is a fun and fast daily trainer. I really enjoying the experience that this provides. It's a nimble shoe, it's an agile shoe, and the extra Lightstrike Pro in the shoe definitely makes a difference. It adds some extra softness to the landing experience. It adds more lightness, or I guess it subtracts heaviness from the overall experience of the shoe. And there's just a little bit more responsiveness to it as well because that Lightstrike Pro is both cushion and bouncy at the same time. The Lightstrike foam, the carrier foam that's in this shoe, is still pretty firm, and I wish there were a way they could soften that up just a little bit, but overall it helps provide structure and stability without doing the thing that I feel like almost every shoe has done this year. Every time I look at the bottom of a shoe, it feels like every shoe has added a whole bunch of width to the footprint to make it so that it's harder for your foot to kind of cave in an unexpected way as you're running. This one still stays pretty narrow through the middle of the foot, which I think is pretty much a key component that you need for a shoe that you want to feel fast in, that you want to feel nimble in. And so it ends up being a really great shoe for your easy everyday runs, but it's also great for strides and light workouts. Whether you're taking it for a fartlek where you're playing around with some faster paces on your run, or if you're taking it onto the track. I took it for a bunch of 200-meter repeats on the track, and it did really well there because the shoe is light and agile, and I feel like it turns over really well. Now, certainly a carbon option would also be a lot of fun too, but if you're looking to save your carbon fiber until either later in the training block or maybe just for your races, or maybe you just don't want to be in carbon for all your workouts, I feel like this is going to be a really great option for those 200s and 400s that you might want to do on the track. I think it's going to be a great shoe for newer runners because you're going to be able to take this one shoe and use it for pretty much everything that you're doing, whether it's your easy runs, your workouts, and probably some of your races as well. But I also think it's going to be a really great shoe for experienced runners alike, whether you're a high school sprinter or you're an adult marathoner. This is a shoe that's going to be able to provide you a fun and fast experience. I think just about the only weakness that this shoe has is that it's not really a shoe that I take for very long runs. So for a run that's going to be longer than 90 minutes or 2 hours in duration, I feel like the firmness of the shoe might start to kind of wear on you a little bit. But for anything that's going to be in that 90 minutes, 75 minutes or shorter range, I feel like this is going to be a really fun option to pick up. Now, let's wrap up this video by talking about where the Adizero SL2 fits within the broader Adidas lineup, and then we'll get into the buying guide and talk about some alternatives you might want to consider. Now, Adidas is a giant company that sells a bunch of different kinds of running shoes, and there are multiple parallel lines of products. And the Adizero SL2 falls within their race-ready category, and in that category, the Adizero SL2 is the daily trainer. This is the shoe that you're using for most of your runs, logging the most mileage, the kinds of run that you do on most days. Now, to pair with this, to go with a racing shoe, you're going to be looking at the Adios Pro 3. This is the latest version that's available right now. This is going to be the marathon racer, half marathon racer. Now, in between the daily trainer and the carbon eraser is going to be the tempo shoe. And for that, I'm going to put the Takumi Sen 10 right into this slot. Now, this is technically a 5K, 10K racing shoe. And so if you're a 5K, 10K road racer, you probably wouldn't even look at the Adios Pro 3 because that's made for road marathons. And instead, this would be your racing shoe, the Takumi Sen. But it's something that you'd also use for a lot of your workouts as well. So then that leaves a question of, well, what about the Boston? And here's where I think I might ruffle a little bit of feathers, but I think with the direction the Boston has been going for at least the last 3 years, I think while it used to be in this tempo spot, I think they're really moving the Boston into more of this position in the lineup, which is going to be kind of the long run or the max cushion shoe. And I think really what we're getting in the Boston is a max cushion shoe. It's got a lot of Lightstrike Pro, which is nice and cushy and soft. It does have some energy rods in there to give it a little bit of stability, but it also has some Lightstrike, just regular Lightstrike as well, kind of like the daily trainer Adizero SL2 has. And then where the Prime X2 Strung comes in, that's the long run shoe. So you've got long run, especially if you've got some marathon effort miles that you want to put in there, the high levels of Lightstrike Pro that this shoe has, the dual layers of carbon elements, makes it a really fun long run shoe. And you got a max cushion shoe in the Boston, the daily trainer with the Adizero SL2. The tempo shoe is going to be the Takumi Sen. And then for your marathon races and your big marathon workouts, you're gonna go with the Adios Pro 3. Now, some of you might be saying, well, where does that leave the Supernova Rise in all this? Well, the Supernova Rise is part of a different parallel line of products, and it would be kind of like the Adizero SL2 falling into this daily trainer category, but this different line of products is intended to give a different kind of sense of experiences. So like in New Balance, we might see some Fresh Foam X shoes and some Fuel Cell shoes, or in Asics, you might see the Blast shoes like Nova Blast and Super Blast, but then you also have the Cloud shoes like the Nimbus and the Cumulus. Two parallel lines of shoes depending on the kind of experiences in running that you prefer. So this Supernova Rise could fit very well within a broader Adidas lineup, but it doesn't technically fit within the Adizero line of shoes. That's why the word Adizero isn't in the name of this, and it's part of a different lineup that includes both the Supernova Rise, and there's a couple other new Supernova Nova Rise variants that are hitting the market this year. And then also the Adistar or the Adistar BYD, Adistar Beyond. Those are in a separate lineup of Adidas shoes. So hopefully that makes things make a little bit more sense. So now let's talk about the buying guide when it comes to the Adizero SL2. This shoe is available now and it retails for $130, $10 more than last year's version, but I think it's definitely worth it. I'm really enjoying the upgrades. I feel like it's a much better shoe. But there are other shoes that are on the market. Let's see what they come in at. The first shoe that I think that stacks up really well against the Adizero SL2 is from Puma, and that's the Velocity Nitro 3. Now the Velocity Nitro 3 uses two different types of foam. There's an EVA layer on the bottom to help stabilize things, and then there's a nitro layer of foam up top. Now there are multiple kind of grades of foam that Puma has. Actually, there's probably more than 3, but there's kind of like their EVA foam, their nitro foam, and their Nitro Elite, which is in their race product and their faster shoes. The Nitro still is a very good supercritical foam, and I feel like I would use the Velocity Nitro 3 in a very similar way that I would use the Adizero SL2. I feel like they're a little bit firmer than I ideally like for my daily trainers, but the Velocity Nitro 3 comes in at $135, so it's $5 more expensive, and it's also a little bit heavier. Now the other shoe that I think we should look at, and again I think I'm going to ruffle some feathers here, is going to be from Tracksmith. Now this is a shoe that definitely doesn't come up in conversation very much, and primarily that's because of the price. This is a $198 shoe, and it uses a PIBA material in this midsole, but it's designed as a daily trainer. It's got a bunch of rubber on the outsole, and it has materials that are consistent with what you would see on a daily trainer, a shoe that's intended to soak up a lot of miles. The way that this shoe rides, I feel like, again, we're getting a very similar experience to what we might see in the Adizero SL2. Something that's a touch more firm than I would like, but can be bouncy and fast if you need it to be. But overall, is a pretty good shoe for racking up a lot of miles. Problem again though with this shoe is that unless you're a super Tracksmith fan, that $200 price point is going to be really hard to justify. But in terms of what I'm feeling in the shoe, this Tracksmith Eliot is pretty close to the Adizero SL. Now, the last shoe that I think we gotta talk about is last year's Adizero SL. These two shoes are pretty similar. I do prefer the SL2 a lot more because of that extra amount of Lightstrike Pro, which means that the Adizero SL1 is gonna be even firmer still than the Adizero SL2, but it still has a lot of that goodness. It has that 4-foot puck of Lightstrike Pro and has a fun and fast experience. This shoe retailed at $120, but if you can find it in your size, it's on sale now as low as $72 or even more. Sometimes you guys have been telling me that you've been able to find it on even deeper discounts. So it's quite a bit cheaper than the $130 of the Adizero SL2. So if you're looking to save some money, that's a really great option for you to look at, and probably the first one that I'd have you look at. But overall, I do think that the performance upgrades of the Adizero SL2 justify the increase in price, and I'm very happy overall with that $130 price point. So those are my thoughts on the Adizero SL2. Let me know in the comments if you have any other questions, or better yet, stop by the live stream that I do Mondays and Thursdays over on the Kofuzi Run Club channel. I'd love to talk to you guys over there in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?